Hi, so I am Maria Silver Pianov. I tend to go by Silver, and the reason behind that is also one of the reasons that I am sharing my story with you. I know that we're kind of jumping into Black History Month, and one of the important things about Black History Month is kind of understanding how Black history really impacts society as a whole, but especially Black and Indigenous people of color. There's a lot of disparities related to our history in this country. And one of the things that I think is really awesome that your teachers are doing is kind of sharing some experiences people have had in overcoming some of these disparities and kind of creating successful careers despite some of the obstacles, that a lot of people face, but especially obstacles that are somewhat related to Black history within our culture. I am a doula, and if you don't know what that is, I'll kind of jump in a little bit further down. I'm a writer. I'm a parent educator. I also work in education and awareness about maternal health in the U.S., but also specifically maternal health disparities in the Black and Indigenous people of color community in the U.S. We have terrible statistics for every woman in the U.S., but there is a massive disparity between white peers and non-white peers. Black women face a 3 to 4 times increased risk of death related to pregnancy and childbirth. And I'll kind of go a little bit more into depth in that in a little bit, but it's pretty widely accepted within the medical community that there are implicit biases and racism that impact those really unacceptable disparities in statistics. So a little bit about myself and why I have multiple names. I, in early childhood, both of my biological parents had substance abuse issues. I didn't go home with them from the hospital or anything like that. Bounced around to some relatives, bounced around in foster care, and fairly young was placed with the family that would eventually go on to adopt me, but I wasn't adopted until I was a little bit older. So Silver was actually my given name, and Maria was the name that my adoptive parents gave me, with Silver remaining my middle name, but that's the name that I've almost always gone by. And some of it had to do with my maiden name. The names just didn't line up very well. So, that early childhood trauma and instability is something that we know can make things difficult for children. We know that instability can make it challenging for development and neurodevelopment and, getting through school. Because if you're focusing on surviving, or if you're focusing on trying to find that stable emotional, physical connection, it's a little bit harder for you to focus in school. Not impossible, but it's harder. And, after my parents adopted me, they ended up divorcing within a few months. And so that also kind of shifted the structure of my home and how I grew up and, our socioeconomic status. It's more expensive to have 2 households. And so we really just, there was a lot of shifting and things like that. And while I would say I had a generally pretty good upbringing, there were some things that did make it more challenging to find success as an adult. I didn't have a college fund or anything like that. I really didn't know. I was interested in law, and I was also interested in history and social sciences. And, I had kind of started college on and off, and just wasn't sure where I was going. I then also married an immigrant who he didn't speak English until, mid-elementary school. And we both were able to overcome a lot of these obstacles. But there's definitely some challenges that I'm sure some of you guys are facing, not having generational wealth, is a big challenge that a lot of immigrant families and a lot of Black families have. Obviously not all, but because of the history of our country and how it was founded, and, you know, disparities in property and where you were even allowed to live, it definitely impacted socioeconomic statuses then, which continues to have an influence now. But I was fortunate in other ways. I found other ways to overcome the difficulties in that, you know, post-high school education. I knew it was important to have a skill and some type of training, but it can be challenging if you don't have the economic ability to do so. And so I began volunteering after I had my oldest son. I was very fortunate to have very good providers and have a very positive experience, but I slowly learned that was not the norm. And so I began volunteering, and I eventually took a professional training to become a postpartum doula. So that's somebody who provides support to new parents after the baby is born. And then I did a lot of self-education, and I began working in research and writing. I did some internships, and then I finally was able to provide training and awareness and just continued parent and professional education. And, you know, it took a lot of volunteering, which I know can be challenging with different socioeconomics, but it can be valuable. There was a lot of internships and networking. Networking was huge, and then the other thing that was really important was diversifying my skills and the services that I provide. You know, 2020 and the beginning of 2021, it's been kind of crazy. Schooling and work and so many things have been switched to virtual. And, you know, there's a lot of people who provide services that really are struggling right now because there's such a limit in the services that you can provide in person. And so the advantage, although it's a really difficult time to be a teenager right now, is that you're kind of learning that resilience and ability to switch up how you are educating. And so that is a really wonderful skill, despite the terrible circumstances, that you guys can take and think about while you are considering different career options going forward. You know, how can you diversify your skills? How can you diversify your education and services and things like that? It's just something to consider. Anyway, one of the reasons I kind of got into highlighting the disparities in maternal health and early childhood and things like that is actually Mr. Young shared a study from CHOP in about maybe 2013, and it was about the crack epidemic research and children and how that related to gestational exposure to drugs and poverty. And what it found is that poverty played a bigger role in child development than exposure to drugs. I mean, certainly we are not advocating, for gestational exposure to drugs. We know that that does create issues. But what I think it did is it really highlighted the impact poverty and other disparities can have on children. And I initially kind of met him with some resistance, and I was like, that can't be. A lot of my issues had to have been from drug exposure, and some of them were. But it also pushed me to research more and learn more about history and things like that. And so one of the reasons that Black history plays a significant role in understanding the disparities is we have to understand how did communities get to certain areas, and also what services and support and access to healthcare and what racist, biased things continue to impact our community. So specific to my field, one of the reasons that Black history is super important is the foundation of modern gynecology was founded in violent racist acts. And that was the foundation of the beginning of training our OBGYNs in this country. So there was a 19th century physician, Dr. James Marion Sims. And he's been labeled the father of modern gynecology. There were statues for him. He was held to very high esteem in his profession. But here's the thing. He learned by experimenting on enslaved women. They were not given a choice. They were not given they weren't given pain medication. They were not given anesthesia. And he performed surgeries and exams and really violated these women. And how does that, we don't know most of the women that he did, but somehow we were able to know 3. And one of the ways that we as a culture can kind of take back that scenario is, rather than talking about the father of modern gynecology, these are the mothers of modern gynecology. They paid for this with their own bodies and violent experiences. But I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce the one name, but Anarcha, Lucy, and Betsy. And the reason that this is important is some of that research and myths that he discovered is that it continues to impact Black people in healthcare. So Black patients continue to receive less pain medication for broken bones if they're in the ER. Black children receive less pain medication than white children when they are treated for appendicitis. And people inaccurately believe, I think it was something like 40% of first and second year medical students still believed that Black people have thicker skin than white people and experience less pain. This is not evidence-based at all. This kind of stems back from medical experiments being done on Black people. When you're thinking about it, if you are an enslaved woman and slavery is all you've known, and you have physicians doing things to you, what options do you have? Stoicism is something that a lot of Black women, and probably men, I just don't know because I'm not a man, have to display to get through the challenges. And that stoicism is sometimes mischaracterized as not feeling pain, whether physical or emotional, and that is just not true. And so that part of Black history, that violating of women, impacts all areas of medication. But when we combine those biases and false information with the already poor maternal health stats that we have in the U.S., regardless of your background, we see seriously appalling statistics for Black women, Indigenous women, non-native English speakers, and more. Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy and childbirth-related complication than their white peers. And of the maternal deaths in the United States, across all racial lines, is about 50% were preventable. So when we're looking at already being 3 to 4 times more likely to die, and then the fact that 50% of those women, especially in that significantly higher number, didn't have to die. They didn't have to die. Black infants are less likely to see their first birthday than white infants. In the U.S., we have 10.8 deaths per 1,000 live births for Black infants compared to 4.6 per 1,000 for white. So that means a Black baby is more than 2 times more likely to die within their first year of life. But the interesting thing is that we found when Black infants are cared for by Black doctors, they have a significantly reduced risk of infant mortality. That's telling. Very telling. I don't have time to dive into all of the aspects of, medical biases and everything like that. But I think it is very important to kind of see that and how that ties into Black history. And it's been a part of my career because you have a drive when you know that there's something that can be changed. So not only is doula work and birth work a very viable career, it is a career that allows you to make a difference. I am not going to be able to change all of the statistics. Like, I can't do that as an individual, but I can do that for each of my clients. I can do that for my trainees, clients, by educating my trainees. So what do we do with information like this? We have to understand as individuals the huge role that Black history and biases have in healthcare. And when we understand that, we can help by educating our communities about these risks and providing them with evidence-based information to help people self-advocate and make informed decisions. Like when choosing a healthcare provider, sometimes our options are limited, but if we have the opportunity to choose a healthcare provider who is less likely to have biases, that can be protective. There is Michelle Williams. She's from Ubuntu Black Family Health Collective, and she's doing some really important community work and reducing disparities by providing services as a Black individual to Black families in her community. We can help by educating others, but especially healthcare providers. And we can recognize that these disparities while we're building a career, and we know that these disparities make it harder to afford training. So when you find success, one of the things that you can do is work in community education, but also in kind of helping to develop scholarships and, teaching people about the power of self-education and how that can help in your career. Doula work is kind of an out-of-the-box career, but it provides a sustainable income option. And it's also that opportunity to make a really big difference. In balancing your private clients with community clients, it really creates this opportunity where you can make a big difference. It's a good career. And so thank you for letting me share this with you. Again, there's not enough time to share everything with you, but as we kind of jump into Black History Month, I think it's really important to accept and understand that there's so many positive aspects in Black history. There are amazing, amazing people that come out over and above some of these disparities and make huge differences. But we have to also understand as a community how these disparities make it more challenging and how these disparities continue to have an impact on our community. And hopefully we can all continue to work together to improve some of these things.
Hi, my name is Katia Ocasio. I'm 30 years old and I'm a doula. I have a 7-month-old son, and if I'm honest with you, I didn't know what a doula was until I got pregnant. Not only that, but I never knew that it was even possible for me as a Latina to have a doula. My parents are from Puerto Rico. I speak fluent Spanish. I was born in Philly, and my parents didn't have a ton of money growing up. They sacrificed a lot to get us, their children, in a place where we can sort of be whatever we want to be. I was a child abuse detective before I was pregnant. I investigated crimes against children, and I thought I was just gonna retire in that career. In my sort of capacity as a child abuse detective, I advocated greatly for Latinos, specifically Latinos who didn't speak English or who spoke very little English. I've always been very passionate about the complexities of what it means to be a Latino living in America. is real. So when I became pregnant, I realized that that also carried over into the birth world. I realized that personally, the treatment that I was receiving was different because of who I am, because I speak Spanish, because I'm Latina, and because my last name is Ocasio. And if somebody reads that on a piece of paper, unfortunately, it has a huge effect on how I'm treated. But also being passionate about giving voice to things people don't often speak up about. It's a large part of the reason why I became a doula as well. Our communities often struggle with getting proper care, either because of the language that we speak or because of the way that we fear we'll be treated because of who we are. Being a doula allows me to not only advocate for women, support them in such a beautiful, complex, and vulnerable time in their life, but to also educate, let women know what's out there for them, the resources, the level of treatment that every birthing person deserves, and the access that everyone should have to support and community and care and love and compassion. So, not just that, the more research I did about becoming a doula, having my son now, I want to be present with him. Being a doula offers me the opportunity to have my own business, to be my own boss, to make my own schedule around my son, and to make sure that I'm available to him when he needs me. Never in a million years did I think that these things were possible for me, but I'm excited to continue to challenge those sort of limitations that not only I have, but a lot of people have surrounding Latinos. I'm excited to see more representation. I'm excited to see more Latinas, specifically Latinas who speak two languages, be able to sort of bridge that language and culture gap and make sure that every birthing person has the same positive, empowering experience. So thank you for listening to me learning a little bit about why I became a doula. Be well.